Extra as Tropical Storm Debby continues moving across the Carolinas. We're also watching another disturbance as it moves into central and western Caribbean later this week. We're on your side with those details and when we could see our next chance for rain across the state of Alabama.
WBRC Fox 6 News. First Alert Weather Extra starts now.
And you are looking live right now from St. Simons Island, and this is near Savannah. And you can see the camera shaking there. We've had the gusty winds as Debby moves through that state. The wind certainly a factor. However, one of the big stories is going to be all the wet weather with this tropical storm. Is this going to bring any rain? We actually had a couple of tiny showers that showed up across our area today. And what we're trying to do is get a handle on where this thing's going to go later on this week. As we were talking about last week right here, and you're seeing it now, the system slowing down. Will it stall or will it keep moving to the north? The National Weather Service here locally, as well as Weather Service offices throughout the region, are now sending up multiple weather balloons during the day. We only usually send those up a couple times during the day, but they're doing it like 5-6 times a day so we can improve the data and the current conditions. That's what goes into the forecast models. That's how we forecast where systems are going. So the better data that we have at hand, the more data we have to try to figure this thing out. But we're starting to see indications that it may move further north and gradually drift away from the state later on this week. But if it stalls, that could cause some issues with the long-range forecast. But let's get into what's next for us. You'll notice across the state we have temperatures in the 90s, 93 degrees right now in Tuscaloosa, 91 in Anniston. And there are some showers to the south. Way down in here south of Alexander City, you can see some pop-up showers. Folks around the Auburn area dealing with a little bit of rain. As for us, not much. There were a couple showers right there. You can see over Pickens County moving north to south, but we're still underneath that flow out of the northeast on the backside of the tropical system, which is now moving into South Georgia or just crawling along here. And it's interesting. Notice the track takes it back over the Atlantic. So just as, you know, when these systems move over land, they weaken and they become poorly organized. However, if it moves back out, slow movement over the Atlantic is just enough to keep this thing going and dumping lots and lots of rainfall. And the rain, I mentioned the rain being the big story. Look at some of the estimates here. I mean, the models are indicating that we could see 15 plus inches of rain in some areas there across places like Charleston and in South Carolina. So this will be a major flood situation unfolding here for those regions. But notice over the next couple days, this is the Barron model, and you can see how that is keeping this system there off to the east over towards Charleston. And on the back side of this system, we have the northerly flow in place. So in the short term, at least through Wednesday, it looks like we are going to be hanging on to the dry conditions here across our state. And then as we take it on into 4 o'clock there, you can see around Wilmington, Myrtle Beach areas. So again, in the short term, the way we see it, the greatest impacts from this system will be staying to the east. But we're going to talk more about this system with Matt here coming up. And just want to show you here, just check out these scenes from Tallahassee that were sent in by Ryan Carty as Debby made landfall. It was a Category 1 hurricane as it made landfall. It touched down along Florida's Big Bend early this morning in Sarasota County. Authorities were using watercraft, of course, to evacuate residents from one neighborhood due to flooding. More than hundreds of thousands of customers are currently without power. And Matt talks a little bit more, goes into more in-depth analysis with that tropical system and what we're going to be watching for over the next few days.
As you know, Debby is the big story we're going to be talking about all week long, and made landfall this morning right around 6 o'clock Central Daylight Time near Steinhatchee, Florida, with winds up to 80 miles per hour. That pressure down to 979. And now that it's over land, it's going to weaken, but the story has just begun. Now, just to give you a little reference, the last time we saw a storm close to where Debby made landfall was actually about a year ago. On August 30th, we had Idalia that made landfall a little bit farther to the north, but it was also significantly stronger. It was a Category 3 with winds up to 125 miles per hour. The big story with this storm is going to be the rain. Thankfully, we're on the dry side of the storm, but this is what the Weather Prediction Center issues when it comes to flood concern and excessive rain. rain. And you see that purple? That's a high risk of seeing flash flooding within 25 miles of a point. And they only issue these high risk less than about 4% of the year, of days of the year. So it's very rare to see a high risk for excessive rain. This continues not only for tomorrow, but also going into the following day, into Wednesday. Notice in parts of towards Wilmington, down towards Charleston, also a high risk. And why is this significant? 83% of flood-related damage occurs in these high risks, and about 39% of flood-related deaths occur also within this high risk. So this is very significant over the next several days. And just to give you an idea of when it comes to extremes, I've got the most amount of rainfall we've seen from tropical cyclones per state. So for Alabama, back in 1997, Danny was the wettest tropical cyclone to hit the state with almost 38 inches of rainfall. For Georgia, it was Alberto back in 1994. That impacted parts of south and central Georgia, and they recorded almost 28 inches of rain. And Florence, for South Carolina, they had the most rainfall from that storm, over 23 inches. So could we break these records in Georgia or in the parts of South Carolina over the next several days? It is a possibility. Notice the Weather Prediction Center showing a bullseye of almost 1 to 2 feet of rainfall from Savannah all the way up towards Charleston. So this could be very historic and very devastating in parts of coastal regions of Georgia and South Carolina. So we'll keep a close eye on this over the next several days.
Thank you, Matt. And looking at more footage now from around Florida of those conditions in Cedar Key, around 3.5 hours north of Sarasota, water was so high the streets could not even be seen from cars that were waterlogged there. One resident recounts her experience as Debbie made landfall.
There's a lot of water, a lot of wind, a lot of tree branches, a lot of flooding. Had a lot of water, had a lot more rain. However, we were more prepared. So there's a balance that I can't tell how big and how bad it was.
Sadly, at least 4 people have been killed as a result of Tropical Storm Debby in Florida, according to officials. And this comes as several local fire departments are now working together to help hurricane victims in Florida. A team of 16 Hoover, Calera, and Vestavia Hills personnel coming together to create a highly trained Type 1 swift water rescue team that will help with damages, clearing roadways, and of course response. And our Ajane Robinson had more on this story.
And these people are trained in water rescue, search techniques, damage assessment, how to drive boats in pretty austere environments. Of course, they're running chainsaws, helping to clear roads, all types of things.
Now, the team was dispatched Friday night after a specialized request from the Alabama Mutual Aid System.
So this system is a nationwide system that allows states that are under disaster response to call in teams for assistance.
Hoover Fire says they've spent a lot of time, money, and training investing in teams like this to respond to their own community and surrounding ones.
We just believe in doing the right thing and helping our neighbor.
And in 30 seconds, we'll take another check on our forecast here, walk you through that evening forecast and talk about the hot weather in the days ahead. Will we see those heat index levels like last week? I'll let you know after the break. Okay, well, here's the heat index forecast for the next several days. One thing I want to point out, notice Saturday showing a high or heat index of 95 degrees. Seeing some indications we could have some cooler air that moves in this weekend. Just giving you that first alert, but looks as though Wednesday and Thursday still those afternoon heat index levels around 105, especially across parts of West Alabama. So still toasty out there, but hey, feeling like August, right? Not seeing a lot of rainfall. Might see a couple of stray showers on radar tomorrow as Debbie stays off to the east of Alabama, but we'll talk more about that coming up. But right now I want you to check out this video. This was one of the big stories out there all around social media today. Folks were saying, what is going on here? It was a tornado. It moved through the Buffalo area. It started out as a water spout right over the Niagara River before moving on shore near downtown Buffalo. It tore a roof off of a nursing home, brought damages to other structures, and then as it moved over land and it was classified as a tornado, it overturned at least 2 cars. Fire officials say minor injuries were reported at a nursing home, and the National Weather Service in Buffalo gave the tornado a preliminary EF1 rating. But back here at home, we also like to give the weather extra look, especially when it comes to gardening. And I had a chance this past Friday to visit Almond Farms on Straight Mountain, where they're not only known for being a family-owned business, but also for their delicious tomatoes and other fruits and vegetables. They also grow peaches, apples, cantaloupe, as well as bell pepper, squash, and cucumbers. Destiny Almond Gladden, who is the daughter of owner Daniel Almond, says that when it comes to the weather extra can impact how well the tomatoes are going to grow.
I think there's something beautiful about what it does for tomatoes. My dad and my brother are going to tell you that it makes it harder, that, because typically our weather's either more severe or not, it does create a struggle. We tend to have really high winds, and that, tomatoes are staked, so when those high winds come through, you're definitely worried about blowover and things. But realistically, people love Blount County tomatoes. They look for straight mountain tomatoes, and there is something special up here, whether it's the soil or the weather or the combination of the two, that does create something that works together to make the beautiful products that we grow.
And Destiny also says that they like to keep the motto, buy fresh, buy local, meaning that things they may not have, they'll source locally from other farms so that you'll get the extra scoop on fresh produce. Stay tuned for more on Almond Farms tomorrow. I actually met a couple from Sylacauga. They had driven up that day to pick up some produce there at Almond Farms, and well known throughout the area. A lot of great farms out there. If your garden's struggling like mine, there's several places that we can turn to here in Alabama. But across the country, as heat continues to potentially impact the price of produce, Ivan Rodriguez joins us as he talks to farmers on how the heat is impacting their crops.
Inflation in the U.S. may be cooling since hitting a 4-decade high, but hotter temperatures are creating a new set of problems for farmers who grow the nation's food.
We are to a large extent, the business of managing risk, and this just impacts the risk of climate on the crops that we grow.
Tom Evanellis has been growing blueberries and citrus fruits in California and Oregon for decades. He says record-breaking heat is causing his business to suffer.
As it gets warmer, the fruit becomes more delicate, so we'll stop harvesting earlier, so it impacts the amount that we can harvest in a day.
Avanella says the cost farmers like him are incurring by upgrading irrigation systems will eventually be passed down to consumers. Drought concerns on the West Coast only add to the challenges.
As we've improved these irrigation systems, we are actually designing them to be able to provide the precise amount of water that the plant needs, so there's zero waste.
Higher produce prices are a reversal of a trend the country has seen over the last year, with the cost of fruits and vegetables dropping by 0.5%.
Much of this is going to be driven by climate change, which is very real, and we need to aggressively acknowledge that and take steps as a country and as a world to begin to navigate it most effectively.
In Atlanta, I'm Ivan Rodriguez.
Well, in this week's moment of actually, I think what we're going to do here coming up, we're going to be talking about the forecast, and then we'll get back to that here in a few moments. We're going to have some moment of science to show you. I'll see you back here with the 7-day forecast. Stay with us. Welcome back into Weather Extra, and locally no rain showing up at the moment for our area. To the south there was some scattered showers. Looks like maybe a sprinkle still hanging on here over Pickens County. Moving to the south, this is all ground clutter that you see. 93 in Tuscaloosa, 91 in Birmingham. Temperatures well on the warm side still, and you can see through 8 o'clock tonight in the 80s. And we're on the backside of the tropical system. It's well east of us, so we're still in that northerly flow, so we'll have that north wind that continues throughout Tuesday. But notice here the afternoon, there's lunchtime, and showing temperatures around 90. There's an indication that we might still see a couple of isolated showers, but for most of us, again, just staying rain free. And then tomorrow afternoon with those highs in the 90s, still could see a heat index right around 105 in some areas. Still hot afternoons next couple of days, but just not much rainfall. If you plan on washing the car, big check mark. Looks like that dry weather continues right there into Friday, also into Saturday. It's back to school week out there, and I mentioned 95 for the afternoon, the heat index around 105. We'll repeat those kind of temperatures for Wednesday and a Thursday, but by the weekend the heat levels may back off just a bit as the tropical system Debby, if it continues moving north, that's going to give way to some of that drier air to move southward, so we can see those highs in the low 90s. Not a major drop off, but when you would really notice it is during the evenings and during the early mornings. It's going to have that late summer, early fall kind of feel, just very dry conditions out there, less humid. So while we have lows in the mid 70s, there's certainly a chance that for parts of the area we may bring in some mid to upper 60s there by early next week. But that's what we're going to be tracking in the long range. In fact, I'll show you here. I was putting together some of the model data for the long range, and this is the weekend here. I'll bring this map up so you can see it. I just finished putting this together, and there we go. And you can see for Sunday, if you have a trip planned to the Smokies, look at some of these temperatures in here showing mid 50s, perhaps some low 50s there in some of those areas. So if this weekend you were thinking you had a Gatlinburg trip planned, looks like you picked a good one, especially as this tropical system moves on by. Could enjoy some cooler temperatures there for those areas. But as for us, at least right now, we're still talking about the heat. So as we check in on this week's Moment of Science, Dan Smith takes a crack at one of those common things we often hear about during the summertime. It's when we bring the food out of the kitchen and try to, well, cook in the heat. So let's give it a try.
We've all heard that saying, it's so hot you could fry an egg on the sidewalk. Well, during this recent heat wave we have here in the Midwest, we're about to put that notion to the test. Knowing all the while it's unlikely to succeed, but we'll have fun finding out why. Just like high school.
Despite the heat, there are a bunch of factors working against getting that fully cooked late afternoon breakfast. For one thing, how you heat it up. Normal frying comes from a hot pan itself, heated from below, but the second that egg hits the ground, it cools it, relying instead on just that pure sunlight above and surrounding air temperature to carry it the rest of the way. Raw egg white protein strings are all folded up and negatively charged, so they repel one another until you introduce that sizzle. Yolks have more fat to start with, so they're less runny and retain their shape better. Cooking the egg makes those proteins unravel and bind together as most of the water evaporates. Egg whites tend to coagulate between 144 and 149 degrees Fahrenheit, with the yolk taking a bit more effort. Actual air temperatures come nowhere close to that, with the all-time global record just a hair over 134 in Death Valley, but with enough direct sunlight, asphalt can certainly push that into egg frying territory. Here's the setup: one egg on the white sidewalk, a second on the blacktop, and third in a frying pan on the blacktop.
Air temps are pushing 95 and feeling like the hundreds today, but that's still probably not enough to get all of this to work. Still, let's leave this little experiment unattended for an hour and see what happens.
1 hour later.
Well, I wouldn't exactly recommend eating any old egg you find on the sidewalk, but especially not this one. It is far from cooked through. Temperatures just barely getting over the hundreds. Like I said, you don't have that undercooking really to come through. It's relying solely on the sun, plus it's a white surface, which naturally stays cooler. Now onto the asphalt, and now we're getting somewhere. You know, not breakfast, but somewhere. You can at least tell that this thing is trying to congeal, trying to solidify and coagulate. The yolk looks certainly a lot more deformed, a little more evaporation happening, but still not where we would want it to be. And even that safer option in the pan is still not safe. You can actually see where a little bit of that film started to come up from initially where that egg was put down. Now that was going to be the easiest to congeal all along, not exactly appetizing in any stretch. Well, our dine-in order ended up a little scrambled, so how about taking these little babies to go? Your car, the dashboard at least, can provide more heat than the blacktop can sometimes on days like this.
At 95 degrees outside air temperatures, some darker colored vehicles can get up and over that 144 degree mark for the egg whites, not so much the yolk. It also shows you how truly dangerous it is to leave your kids or pets in there, even for a little while. 1 hour later.
All right, let's serve up. Wow, I can't even pull it out of the car. I think my hands are frying more than the egg did, and that's through the towel. Meanwhile, you can see the egg there flaking up a little bit more than the previous run did, congealing a bit more for the egg white. But because I have a lighter silver colored car, I just don't think we quite made it there in that hour's time. Maybe a little bit extra. It has been in direct sunlight this whole time, right around 95 degrees, and you might just make it there. All that having been said, metal is a great conductor of heat, and you might have a better chance frying this thing on the hood of your car compared to concrete, asphalt, or yes, even the frying pan. Strangely, no volunteers for that particular experiment. For this week's Moment of Science, I'm Dan Smith.
I was about to say something if you broke out the Tabasco sauce, but what a way to cook, right? But we've tried the cookie experiment around here many a times when we have the extreme heat across the state of Alabama, but certainly always interesting to test out that theory. But as we return, we're going to share some weather photos that you've shared with us. Still getting a lot of photos from some of those storms there on Friday, and I know folks are still cleaning up out there, but we'll have that for you as we continue right here on Weather Extra.